Welcome to Proudly Out of Line. I'm Marty Moore, an old school dyke and the CEO of Boulder-based Rocky Mountain Equality. With everything going on around us in this world right now, it's the perfect time for all of us to be engaged, informed, and hopefully have a little fun along the way. On with the show. Before we go on to today's very special episode with Jim Obergefell, I want you to know that last week, and since we recorded with Jim, 47 right-wing organizations formed a coalition called Greater Than. And their whole goal is to reverse the Obergefell v. Hodges decision that extended marriage equality to all Americans, regardless of sex. As you can well imagine, two of the leading allies of this group, called Greater Than, are Focus on the Family and the Colson Center, which is a new name to me, but they're both based in Colorado Springs. Surprise. Their campaign argues that children's rights are being violated by gay marriage and that gay marriage should be overturned to protect children. As you know and I know, this has no basis in reality. The campaign claims that it's putting children's interests first. It's doing the opposite. Overturning Obergefell will harm families, all families, and make life more difficult for children who happen to have parents of the same sex. When we recorded Jim a month ago, none of this was on the table. Politics in these times move way too fast. We need to be vigilant in protecting the rights we have. Now, truly, on with the show. Welcome to Proudly Out of Line. My name is Marty Moore, and today I am joined by the fabulous Jim Obergefell. Jim, what an honor it is to have you on the show. You're a legend, you're a hero, and a name that everyone in this country should know. Our history, as well as our rights, are right now in danger of being lost. And it's critical that we talk to you and get your sense of what the world really looks like with respect to marriage equality. The first time I met you was on phone. So I got to hear your voice. I was very nervous. Your agent called. It's like, oh my God, we're meeting Jim Obergefell today. And I had talked to Melissa Etheridge. I had talked to Paula Poundstone, Martha Choi, pardon me. And they all had something special they needed. I need a chair this size. I need a certain Coca-Cola. Please don't bother me. Pick me up 2 minutes before I'm supposed to be up here. We're on the phone, and you, Jim, say, I have one special request. And I thought, oh my God, who is
What's
this
coming?
prima donna? That's right. And you, sir, said, I'd sure like to go to Liberty Puzzles.
Yes,
And
I
that's
did.
when I knew we were connected.
Well, and you arranged a fabulous tour of Liberty Puzzles, so thank you for that.
And it's a good thing we did because my puppy has eaten 2 pieces of one of my puzzles, and now I know they can make them, and I can have a complete puzzle again.
Right? And there should be a photo of your puppy on their wall of shame.
That's exactly right. They just are in the local Boulder paper. They're celebrating their 20th anniversary of being in business. Such a great company. Are you working on one right now?
I am not. I finished one last week and started another, but I wasn't in the right mood, so currently not working on one.
hmm The right mood is hard to come by these days, isn't it?
That is true. I can't find the right mood to pay attention to television or movies or pretty much anything.
What's it feeling like emotionally for you right now?
Overwhelming, I guess, because I just don't understand why our country is where it is these days and why the queer community is being attacked from all sides. You know, the trans community, marriage equality, our right to exist, our books, everything is under attack. So I guess overwhelming is what comes to mind. And that's not even talking about everything else happening in our country.
Yeah, I heard there's something about Venezuela.
Well, yeah, I guess it's okay for us to just kidnap any world leader we want.
Right? Yeah, it's it's terrible. We're in terrible state of affairs here in the state of Colorado. On Friday, the two largest providers of gender affirming health care for youth closed. And so our phones, as you can imagine, are ringing off the hook, and parents are trying to find those necessary resources for their kiddos. So there is so much going on.
There is, I mean, the trans community has been just attacked in every imaginable way, and it's it's horrifying to see. And I can't imagine what life is like for a trans person these days, especially a trans kid, when they're seeing their future, their possible future, ripped away from them. And for what reason? Just because these people like being mean.
Cruelty is the name. I don't either. Somebody in the sound room with me right now is trans, and as you're making your statements, my tears formed in my eyes because it's a lot. As a cis
It,
lesbian, I see what's happening, but it doesn't hit me in the same way as the trans people I know.
right. We can empathize to a certain extent, but you're right. We can't fully understand what life is like for them, and it just breaks my heart what they're going through. They're human beings, and they certainly don't deserve to be treated this way.
Yeah, and we're doing everything we can. It sounds like you are too, to make sure that this trajectory changes, and hopefully it changes by November.
I hope so. I think things will be even worse if there aren't changes that take place in November. Please let it be so.
Yeah. Jim, you ran for Congress. Did you run for Senate?
I actually ran for the Ohio House of
Pardon me.
Representatives.
What was that like?
It was great. I'm really glad I did it. I had a great experience. And honestly, the thing that I think surprised me the most was how much I enjoyed going door to door and talking with people. And again, I had people say, we have never had an elected official or someone running for office ring our doorbell. I really enjoyed that. But I think part of that was it really just played to my introverted side where I like having conversations with one or two people. And that's what I was doing at those doors. I was having a conversation with one or two people, and it just really was a great experience. I'm glad I ran for the Ohio House of Representatives. I didn't win, thank you, gerrymandering, but I'm glad I did it. It felt important to me to run as a known out gay man activist. I felt it was important to let people in this district know that, well, queer people in this district know that there's someone out there fighting for them, running to represent them and everyone else, but someone who would run and actually legislate positively for a marginalized community instead of attacking that marginalized community. So for me, it was a really important thing to do.
Out gay man. I'm going to pick up on that and go back in history a little bit because what I work with a lot of younger people who were born the year I graduated from college or later, and so sometimes history gets lost in all of that. So let's go back in history, Jim, and because not everyone knows your story, and it's an intense story. And I think I would start by asking you, why did you and your husband decide to get married?
Well, our desire to be married goes back to the mid 90s. We became a couple New Year's Eve 1992 into 1993, and we talked about marriage as early as probably mid 94, maybe 95.
Lesbians.
And Yes, we were. And it was something we both wanted. We both wanted to get married, but we also both wanted it to be a marriage just like any other marriage. We had friends who did commitment ceremonies. We had friends who did, you know, marriage, but it wasn't a marriage. It was just a ceremony that they went through because it was important to them to do a public commitment to the other. But John and I wanted marriage, and we wanted everything that marriage signified. In the mid '90s, that wasn't an option anywhere. And in Ohio, we were certainly behind the times when states started passing marriage equality. We still had a state level Defense of Marriage Act on the books. And we really hadn't talked about marriage ever since the mid '90s when we both agreed we're not going to do just something symbolic. So we just assumed we'll never be able to get married. Well, but then John was diagnosed with ALS in 2011. And as I became his full time caregiver, as he lost every ability, and in April of 2013, we started at home hospice care for him. And I was still his full time caregiver, other than about 5 hours a week when the hospice nurses visited. And again, we had never gone back to the idea of marriage. We lived our lives as a married couple. Our family and friends, our coworkers saw us, considered us a married couple, but we weren't. And it wasn't until June 26, 2013, as I was standing next to John's bed holding his hand, and we learned that the Supreme Court struck down the Federal Defense of Marriage Act with their ruling in United States versus Windsor, that marriage popped up in my mind again. And I realized, oh, wait, we've always wanted to be married, but we wanted it to mean something. We wanted it to be legal. And wait, here's our opportunity to get married. And what more important time than when John's nearing the end of his life? We wanted to say I do. And I realized, okay, well, Ohio still won't recognize us, but the federal government will. So I spontaneously proposed. And luckily, John said yes. So that's when marriage came back into our lives as something we could actually do. It was just a few months before John died, June 26th of 2013, and we made it happen.
How'd you make that happen, being stuck in the lovely state of Ohio?
I would have loved to just put John in his wheelchair and go the 6 blocks or so to our county courthouse for a marriage license, but we couldn't. So here we are, a gay couple, one of whom has no physical abilities. He's fully bedridden. He could move his right hand a little bit. He could speak a sentence or two at a time, but that was it. We had to figure out, where are we going to go to do something millions of others do every single day without a second thought. So I started researching where we could go. And when I discovered that Maryland was the one state that did not require both of us to appear in person to apply for the marriage license, I thought, oh, wait, this is where we're going to go. Because my goal, if I have to take John out of town, out of state, I want to keep him as safe and as comfortable as much as possible. And I want to limit the amount of time he has to be away from home where he's safe and comfortable. So Maryland helped. I could go get the marriage license, and then John had to travel only for the ceremony. So that's what we planned to do. And I started thinking, well, how are we going to get there? Okay, I could put John in his wheelchair in our minivan. No, that would be really painful for him. Same thing with an ambulance. I couldn't take him to the Cincinnati airport and fly commercially because he had no abilities. So really our option was to charter a medical jet. And I started getting quotes, and a medical jet isn't inexpensive, but it was something we could afford. But I thought, I'm just gonna go to Facebook. This is the only positive thing I'll say about Facebook ever. Went to Facebook and just posted, hey, John and I are going to charter a medical jet to fly to Maryland to get married. Does anyone have a connection? And really, all I was thinking was maybe somebody will know somebody, and that might help mitigate the cost. And our family and friends started commenting, no, Jim, we can't help that way, but you know what? You and John, you deserve to get married, and we want to help. So please accept this gift of money. And our family and friends covered the entire $14,000 cost of the chartered medical jet. So we flew to Baltimore Washington International Airport along with John's Aunt Paulette, because she had told us years before, she said, you guys, in my opinion, represent marriage better than any other couple I know. And if you can ever get married, I would be honored if I could officiate. So Aunt Tootie, that's her nickname, Aunt Tootie went to the internet where she clicked the ordain me button years before because she wanted to be ready to officiate if we could ever take advantage of her services. So after I proposed, she was my first phone call. Hey, Tootie, does that offer still stand? She said, of course. So we flew from Cincinnati to Baltimore Washington International Airport and we landed. We parked on the tarmac. The nurse and the two pilots left the airplane. So it was just the three of us, but we were joined by one more person. And this person ended up playing a really big role in what happened afterwards. My Facebook post also got the attention of a former neighbor of ours. She was on the editorial board of the Cincinnati Enquirer newspaper. And when she saw my post, she reached out and said, Hey, John, Jim, I've been trying to get the paper to come out in support of marriage equality. What would you think about me writing a story about what you're doing? Well, we knew and trusted her, and we said, okay. So she sent a photographer slash videographer who met us in the airplane at BWI Airport. So he was in the airplane taking photos and video. And I got to take John's hand, and we got to say those words we had wanted to say for almost, about 20 years. I thee wed. I do. And it was pretty wonderful to be able to say that no, the federal government would recognize us, would see us. And that was all we wanted. We just wanted to get married and be able to call each other husband until John died.
How soon after Jim did John die?
John died a little over 3 months after we got married. But what we didn't expect to happen because of the story that came out about us. So we got married on a Thursday. It came out in the Sunday printed paper, but on Saturday, it came out online. And friends were at a party. They're both attorneys, former neighbors, and they ran into a friend of theirs, a civil rights attorney in Cincinnati named Al Gerhardstein. And they brought our story up, and Al knew nothing about us. He hadn't seen the article on the internet. So they told him about us and what we had just done. And Al reached out through those two friends to say, Hey, John, Jim, I'd like to come over and chat if you're up for it because you have a problem and you don't realize it.
What?
So 5 days after we got married, he came to our home. We knew of Al, but we had never met him before. And when I opened the door, I still remember there was just something about him, this feeling of kindness that was so strong. We knew he was smart because of everything he was known for and everything he had done in Cincinnati. But the kindness was really important to us. And he came to our home and he pulled out a blank sheet of paper, which happened to be, well, it wasn't a blank sheet of paper. It was a sheet of paper. It was a blank Ohio death certificate. And he said, Do you guys get it? Do you understand that when John dies, his last record as a person, his Ohio death certificate will be wrong? Because of Ohio's state level Defense of Marriage Act, here where it says marital status at time of death, Ohio will ignore your lawful Maryland marriage and they'll say John was unmarried. And Jim, nope, your name will not be listed there as his surviving spouse. He was right. We hadn't really thought about it. We knew Ohio wouldn't recognize our marriage, but that was abstract. Finding out that John's last record as a person would be wrong made that abstract understanding real, made it harmful, made it hurtful. And it broke our hearts, but I think more importantly, it made us angry. And he said, Do you want to do something about it? Al tells me we talked about it for less than a minute before saying yes. We do want to do something about it.
Did you run legislation?
No. Al's idea was, let me set the stage. Here it is Tuesday, 5 days after we got married. John is nearing the end of his life. And Al said, I think we have a legal case here to sue the state of Ohio and the city of Cincinnati because they're both involved in the death certificate process. In Ohio, first cousins cannot get a marriage license or get married. In Ohio, an underage couple without parental approval cannot get a marriage license and get married. However, there are other states where two 16-year-olds can get a marriage license and get married without parental approval. There are other states where first cousins can get a marriage license and get married. As soon as those couples, after they marry, as soon as they cross the border into Ohio, Ohio said, great, we see your marriage, we respect it, we protect it, we defend it as we would any other marriage, even though those marriages were marriages that could not be entered into in Ohio. So Al said, I think we have a very simple legal argument here. Ohio, you recognize some out of state marriages that cannot be entered into in Ohio, but not others. And by doing that, you are creating separate classes of citizens, and that's wrong. So that was our legal argument. So that was Tuesday. On Friday, 8 days after we got married, Al filed our lawsuit in federal district court. And because of John's health, the judge it was assigned to, federal judge Timothy Black, had to clear his docket and hear arguments on that case on our lawsuit as soon as possible. So on Monday, 11 days after we got married, I was in federal district court for the hearing on our case.
Wow.
Yes, it happened so quickly. It still honestly stuns me to realize that's how fast the process went.
Justice can work.
It does. And at 5 o'clock that same day, 11 days after we got married, Judge Timothy Black ruled in our favor and said, Ohio, when John dies, you must recognize their marriage on his death certificate. John died 3 months later to the day, but he died a married man.
So how did that case get to the Supreme Court?
So after John died is when the state of Ohio could appeal Judge Black's ruling. Before John died, they couldn't appeal. There was a temporary restraining order, but after he died, they could, and they did finally appeal. And they also appealed a second marriage case in Ohio that Al had. Our case was about the end of life. Al had a second case that was about the beginning of life. He had same-sex couples who'd either given birth or adopted in Ohio, and they sued Ohio for accurate birth certificates for their children, listing both parents' names. They went before Judge Timothy Black, who also ruled in their favor. So Ohio appealed our case, the birth certificate case, and our two cases were consolidated with cases from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Michigan. And we all went to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in August of 2014, one of the most conservative appeals courts, circuit courts in the country. And everybody said, Jim, don't get your hopes up. Not in this particular appeals court, and they were right. And in December of 2014, they ruled against us in a 2-1 ruling. And they said, in essence, you have wasted the court's time. You do not belong in a court of law. You belong on the street corners in the court of public opinion, trying to pass legislation and getting marriage that way. You don't belong in our courtroom, which to me just was so infuriating because silly me, I was always taught and I always believed that one of the most important roles of our court system was to protect our civil rights. And for anyone listening who enjoys reading court decisions, I highly recommend reading the dissent. It was a 3-judge panel. The one judge who was on our side and dissented, Judge Martha Daughtry, her dissent is blistering. She takes those other 2 judges to task. So we lost. And Al called me to let me know, and he said, so do you want to keep fighting? And of course, my answer was yes. If I didn't keep fighting, I would have felt like I was not living up to my promises to John. And there was no way I was going to not fight because that was part of loving, honoring, and protecting him. And I promised to do that. So I said, yes, I do want to continue. So Al filed our appeal with the Supreme Court. And in January of 2015, they announced that they would hear arguments in that consolidated case from the 4 states. And the legal team had to argue 2 things: the right to marry and the right to recognition of out-of-state marriages.
And so did you go to the Supreme Court and sit in the courtroom for all of this?
I did.
Ooh.
I'm going to the Supreme Court, and crazy things of all crazy things, the case bears my name, which the funny thing is I really knew nothing about the Supreme Court, and it still surprises me that it's known as Obergefell v. Hodges for one very simple reason. There were these different cases from 4 different states, so all different case names. The only reason it's called Obergefell v. Hodges is because Al filed our appeal with the Supreme Court 10 minutes before the Tennessee attorney filed the appeal on the Tennessee case. So had Al filed 11 minutes later, the case would have a different name. It was simply a matter of timing. So here I am, my name's on the case. This is about the most important person in my life, the most important relationship I had had. Of course, I'm going to that Supreme Court because I need to hear what they say. I need to hear what the states are arguing, and I want to see what happens. I want to experience it. So yes, I was in the courtroom on April 28th, 2015, for oral arguments, and there were several other plaintiffs there. A lot of the attorneys, because at this point, this consolidated case, we had more than 30 plaintiffs and more than 20 attorneys. So there were a lot of us there that day for oral arguments, and I was sitting out in the courtroom with Aunt Tootie. She came with me. John couldn't be there, but it kind of felt like he was, with her sitting next to me, and got to sit there and listen to these ridiculous arguments from the states, from the 4 states, and then hear Mary Bonato and Douglas Howard Dreimeyer argue for the right to marry and the right to recognition. Yeah, I had to be there. I wasn't going to miss it for any reason.
How do you get in there as a plaintiff? Do you have right of first refusal to a seat, or how does that work?
The Supreme Court doesn't care one bit about plaintiffs. The Supreme Court is all about attorneys arguing points of law. So it wasn't until about a month before oral arguments, the court said, okay, plaintiffs, we hear you. If you want to be in the courtroom, we'll reserve seats for you, but you can't be in the courtroom for the full 2.5 hours. You can only be in it for part. You can be there for the hour-and-a-half argument on the right to marry, or you can be there for the hour argument on the right to recognition. Well, I wanted to be there for the full 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So I stood on the sidewalk in front of the Supreme Court to be in the courtroom. So Aunt Tootie and I are in that courtroom, and the people around us had no idea that I was the named plaintiff. None. And other plaintiffs who were there, several of them did choose to be in there for the hour-and-a-half or the hour. I think I was the only one who sat in the courtroom for the entire 2.5 hours.
Wow. Okay, and then that was argued, and then June 26th.
June
The ruling
26,
came.
2015. Yes, what a day. But I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. Everybody said, Jim, if you want to be in the courtroom when this decision comes down, start going in mid-June, because this is a huge case, and the court typically waits until the end of their term at the end of June to release their decisions on big cases. So I was there in the courtroom on Monday, June 15th, no decision. Well, there were decisions, just not our decision. I was there Monday, June 22nd, same thing, no decision for us. So at that point, we were all thinking it was going to be Monday, June 29th, because the court will say on their calendar in advance, we'll release decisions on Mondays, but they don't tell you what decisions. You just know they're going to release decisions on Mondays. So we're in front of the courthouse on the 22nd thinking, well, it's going to be Monday, June 29th, when somebody came running out and said, well, they just added Thursday, June 25th as a decision day. Someone else came running out. They just added Friday, June 26th as a decision day. And I was in front of the courthouse with Al, other plaintiffs and attorneys, and we all looked at each other and said, it's going to be Friday, June 26th, because United States versus Windsor, that decision came out on June 26th. June 26, 2004, the decision in Lawrence versus Texas, which struck down anti-sodomy laws, came out on June 26th. So we thought, okay, it's going to be Friday, June 26th. But I went on the 25th just to be sure. Nope. So I get there on Friday, June 26th. And again, every time I was in the courtroom, I just stood on the sidewalk in front of the courthouse to be in there for oral arguments for decision days. And we're out there Friday, June 26th, and I'm number 1 in line. And the court officer comes by to hand out tickets to be in the courtroom. And that happens. And I'm chatting with other people in line. And I look down at my ticket and I realized something had changed. I was already feeling optimistic on June 26th. But that morning, the ticket had changed. Every other time it wasn't that it said anything different, but every time I was in the courtroom for oral arguments, April 28th, decision days, June 15th, 22nd, 25th, those 4 days, the ticket was bright orange. Well, suddenly on Friday, June 26th, it was no longer bright orange, it was lavender. Yes. And I held the ticket up because nobody had mentioned it. And I said, and I pointed at it, do you think this is a hint? So we were already feeling optimistic, but boy, seeing that lavender ticket made us feel even more optimistic because number one, why change colors? And if you are going to change colors of all colors, why lavender?
There must have been a great clerk. Oh, we're going to pause right there. Jim froze too. Okay. The perfect place to stop. There, you're back. My
I'm
dog
back.
barked.
Yes.
We're having unstable internet. The lavender. Okay, hang on one second. I'm going to pick up on the lavender. Okay, somebody's outside the door. Don't leave. I think he's fine. They step away from the door. Okay, we're ready. So, do you think there was a clerk who was giving you a sign?
I absolutely think there was a clerk or potentially even a justice who said, here's something we can do to give people waiting to be in that courtroom a sign. So, do I know for certain? Absolutely not. But why else would they change the ticket color to lavender, such an important color for the queer community? So, I went into that courtroom feeling pretty optimistic.
Oh my God, that's a little known fact. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, and what's really frustrating is as soon as you get to the door of the courtroom, they take your ticket. So I would love to have my lavender ticket number one, but no, it was probably thrown out that day. Who knows?
Did you take a picture of it?
Yes, I do have pictures.
My mind is turning on that picture. Wow. So you're in the courtroom.
Hmm.
Is it the only
In the
case that decision was given that day?
So in the courtroom, and court comes to order, and the Chief Justice says Justice Kennedy will read the first summary decision. And everybody had said, Jim, if they say Kennedy's reading the summary decision, listen up, it's probably your case. So I'm with two friends and I grab their hands. They're sitting on either side of me, like, oh God, here it comes, here it comes. And Justice Kennedy started reading his decision. And my first reaction was, we won, we won, we won. And then he kept reading. And legal writing isn't always incredibly clear to those of us who aren't attorneys. So I found myself wondering, did we win? I thought we did, but now I'm not
What
so
did he say?
sure. I don't even remember, but it was enough to make me doubt my initial reaction that we won. But as he kept reading it, it's like, yes, Jim, we won. So I burst into tears. You could hear people sobbing around the courtroom. Al, our attorney, told me later he's never seen so many attorneys crying. And, of course, my first thought was, John, I wish you were here. I wish you could experience this. I wish you could know that our marriage can't be erased. But then what I wasn't expecting to feel was this realization that for the first time in my life as an out gay man, I felt like an equal American. So
And
Justice
that's,
Kennedy,
can you try to describe that a little more? Like what that, because I've had that feeling, not at the Supreme Court. I want to hear your description of it's visceral, isn't it? Please.
it is the only thing I can really remember is when that hit me, it was like my body relaxed. Like I kind of like a lot of the tension, and sure, a lot of the tension was based on just the experience I was having, the case. But part of that also was the tension I had carried as a second class citizen in this country, and it let go. And it was a very visceral reaction that, oh my goodness, my marriage exists. They can't erase it. I can stop worrying every time I check the mail that I'm going to get an updated death certificate from the state of Ohio saying John was unmarried. Because I did every day after the Sixth Circuit ruled against us. I wondered every time I went to the mail, is this the day I get an updated death certificate sent by someone in the state of Ohio who just wants to make a point and wants to be a jerk. So that fear just disappeared. And just that feeling of, oh, the most important relationship someone can have, or one of the most important relationships someone can have, their spouse, their husband, their wife, that most important person in their world, they see us. We exist. I feel equal in that way. And it really was just this amazing realization. And then, after Justice Kennedy finished reading his summary decision, the Chief Justice and Justice Scalia read their dissents.
Yeah.
And, justices don't frequently read dissents from the bench, but they did in this case because they wanted to make it clear that they weren't happy with this. And all I could think was, sour grapes, I don't care. I'm ignoring you because we won, and I don't care what axe you have to grind here. I don't care that you lost. You should have lost. I want to go outside because there's a party. I'm sure there's a party happening in front of this building. But we had to then sit through, I think, three, maybe four more decisions. And just the whole time, just antsy, just, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. but court finally came to a close and we were dismissed and we were gathering in the hallway. Al, other attorneys, other plaintiffs, and I, and we're gathering in the hallway, just quick, powwow to talk about what had happened and what comes next. And we were getting ready to head down that hallway outside the courtroom and out the doors at the top of the steps at the Supreme Court, because there was a press conference we were going to head to on the steps of the courthouse. And we start walking that way towards those double doors, and we're stopped by an officer who said, "I'm sorry, you can't exit those doors. You're going to have to exit the side of the building." And in my mind, I'm thinking, what do you mean we can't exit that way? That's what Supreme Court winners get to do. They get to open those doors and walk down those steps. Well, the crowd on the plaza was so big and so celebratory, they had pushed past barricades and they were up on the steps in the columns flanking that front door. So for safety's sake, they did not want us to exit that way. So we exit the side of the building, and Al and I are arm in arm with other plaintiffs and attorneys behind us, and we step out into this crowd. And to say the air was electric just doesn't capture it, but it's the closest I can come to. I mean, it was an explosion of joy on that plaza. And we step out into the crowd, and they see us, and they realize who we are. And the crowd just parted before us as we're making our way through this celebratory crowd. People are singing, they're crying, they're trying to give us hugs and high fives, and we make our way all the way down to where the podium is set up for the press conference. And that finally starts, and I'm given the honor of making remarks first. So I get to speak to the press and to the nation about what this decision meant. And wow, not something I ever thought I would do. So I finished my remarks. Oh, were you going to ask something, Marty? I'm sorry.
I'm seeing the picture of you on the steps. Were you on Time Magazine?
Maybe, probably.
Everywhere you were. Go ahead with your story. But I'm seeing you there.
Yeah, I'm sure I was. I feel like I was on every single publication possible out there that day, that week, that month. So I finished my remarks for the press conference, and I turn around and I have an interview with CNN. And I finished that interview, and the CNN crew is right behind me, and I'm looking back at the courthouse, and the press conference is continuing, and the party's still happening. And someone hands me my phone and says, "You have a phone call," and my phone's on speaker. And it's the President of the United States, President Obama, on speaker in the midst of this crowd. Yeah, I'd had a lot of
Put him on your lap, baby.
Obama, and I hang up, and the CNN crew had captured everything on tape because they happened to be still behind me. So I finished that call with the president, and I did more interviews, and every single person said, "Well, we saw you got a call from the president. What did he say? What did you say?" And my honest reaction was, I haven't a clue. I don't know if I formed complete sentences. I hope I was polite and respectful. The only thing that kind of stuck in my mind was the president saying something along the lines of, "Thank you, Jim. You and your husband made the world a better place today."
Oh,
Well, thankfully, about a week later, the White House released a video, and it was split screen, the president at his desk in the Oval Office on one side, Jim in front of the Supreme Court on the other, and it's our phone call. And I never listen to myself. I hate hearing myself in recordings, but I listened to that. And I listened to it and I thought, whew, thank goodness I did not sound like an idiot. I formed complete sentences. And yeah, I was polite and respectful. Oh, yeah. And President Obama did say, thank you. You helped make the world a better place today.
oh my God, what an experience. Your whole story around this is faded with celebration along the way.
Mm-hmm. That it was quite an experience. And it's just simply because John and I loved each other and we weren't willing to be treated as second class citizens. John deserved to die a married man. We had jumped through all of these hoops that nobody else ever had to think about doing. And damn it, we deserve to exist in the eyes of the state we called home.
Because of you and John's love, there are over 800,000 same sex marriages in the United States. The numbers say that we're raising over 300,000 children
Mm-hmm.
in those loving homes. So I think President Obama was right once again that you've made this world a better place.
Well, honestly, when I think about there's one interaction I had that for me just really encapsulates in so many ways what this decision meant. It was a young woman in Tennessee. After I spoke, she came up to talk to me and she said, "Jim, I just want you to know, if it weren't for Obergefell v. Hodges, if it weren't for a lawsuit, if it weren't for a court decision," she said, "I would have committed suicide. I was a closeted queer kid. I never saw a future for myself. But the Obergefell decision, the right to marry, that gave me a future where I'd never had one before. And it gave me a reason not to take my own life." And I really think about her a lot because I know she wasn't the only person who had a reaction like that. And I also have had the joy of officiating almost 30 weddings, mostly queer couples, but a few straights got in there too. And I see that and I love that I've been part of those ceremonies of those two people making promises to each other. And I know there are these hundreds of thousands of couples who have done that same thing. And the world hasn't come to an end. Straight people are still getting married, they're still having kids. And I say that because I still shake my head when I was in the Supreme Court for arguments on the case. The states of Ohio argued that if we allow marriage equality, straight people will stop getting married. And even more explicably, if we allow queer people to get married, not only will straight people stop getting married, but they'll stop having children. That was an argument they actually spoke out loud in the highest court in our land. So I think about that because all of these terrible things they said would happen if we allowed marriage equality. None of it's happened,
No.
and we knew none of it would happen. So it just makes me angry and frustrated and whatever that people still are fighting marriage equality, knowing the good things that it has done for millions of people. Queer people are much more likely, 8 times more likely to foster and adopt kids from the child welfare system than straight couples. Well, if you're so worried about the family and you're so worried about children, then you should be applauding that. And the last thing you should be doing is trying to do away with marriage equality.
Yeah. Or keeping us from fostering kids with LGBT identities. I mean, they just continue, don't they?
They do. And I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
Jim, I want to ask um, so the person with really bad hair out of Kentucky, Kim Davis.
I don't I don't like to say her name either.
Okay. So that person, I can, ugh. Um, That case obviously didn't uh, get cert. From my reading, Thomas and others have said they're going to, and I think Project 2025
Hmm.
explicitly says that they're using biblical terms and it's going to be between a man and a woman. In the world that you travel in, the conversations that you have with the movers and shakers, is there anything on the horizon that we should be concerned about regarding same-sex marriage in the United States in the coming year?
Well, I don't know exactly where this is, and hopefully I won't misspeak in any way, but there is a judge in Texas who has been
Oh,
refusing to,
color me surprised. Go
right,
ahead.
right. He's been refusing to officiate queer marriages, and he's planning to, or has, going to the circuit court that covers Texas, asking them to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges on religious freedom basis. And what really frustrates me on this, so let's say there's a conservative Christian couple who wants to get married. Are they going across town to the Jewish temple? Are they going to the mosque to ask those religious or faith leaders for their approval, for their blessing of their marriage? No. So why on earth do they think their beliefs, whether they're just a regular person or if they're a judge or if they're a county clerk? Again, judges and county clerks are there to for every person.
Yeah,
They're
for
there
all of
to
us.
serve everyone, not just the some. So why do they think their religious faith, why do they think our marriages, our relationships require their approval? They don't, because marriage is a civil right. It's not a religious requirement. You can get married without a religious ceremony, without a faith leader. So it just frustrates me. So yes, there is a case out there, or the rumblings of a case that is out there out of Texas. That'll be one of the next things that come up trying to overturn Obergefell.
Yeah, gonna keep coming. And
Oh,
it
they
looks to
are.
me
They
like
they
you're
won't
ready for the
stop.
fight. I think you're a person who's willing to.
Whatever it is that I need or can do throughout this fight, I'm there, because every kid deserves to grow up in a world where they have the right to marry the person they love, whomever that person happens to be. For those who choose to get married, you should have that right. And I'll be there to fight for it in
Will
any way
Aunt
that I
Tootie
can.
be there also?
Aunt Tootie, health and everything else willing, she'll be there as much as she can. But she's getting up there in age, so, and her husband's even older, so she'll be there in spirit, if not in person.
We're getting close on our time, and what a great story you have, and thanks for sharing it with me and with our listeners. It gives me hope. I came into today much like I come into every day, wondering what hell the federal government is
Right.
going to bring, and if they bring something today, I feel a little more centered and able to take on the fight because of my conversation with you, Jim. So I want to say thank you for that and for making time for us.
Of
Um,
course,
you've
Marty, thrilled to be
you've
here.
answered so many of the questions that we had together in notes in just a free flowing conversation. But I have to throw in two things. One, you mentioned sour grapes. I want you to tell us a little bit about equality vines.
Oh, what a perfect segue. So in 2015, I got a phone call out of the blue from someone who's now my business partner. And he had been in the wine business for some time at that point. And he said, Jim, I have an idea for a business, but I want you to be part of it. So we met over dinner in New York and discussed this idea. And we actually founded the business that year, Equality Vines. And we released our first wine in 2016. And our business is all about supporting organizations fighting for equality. So every wine we release supports an organization doing really important work. So right now, our wines support organizations in queer rights, women's rights, immigrants' rights. We've done some environmental equality wines, and we support lots of other organizations. And it's been a blast. We have a tasting room in Sonoma County in Guerneville, right on the Russian River. And I only learned this within the past year or so, maybe 2 years. When we had that first conversation in my business partner's mind, Matt, he was thinking, if we eventually donate $100,000 to partner organizations, I'll consider the business a success. Well, we're over $300,000. So I'm really proud of what we've built, and it's been an incredible experience. And all of our wines have a story, and they all support something really important, an organization doing very good work.
Love wins. That's a tasty one.
Love wins. That's our flagship label, our sparkling wine. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. The other thing that, so I'm going to share a little bit of my story because you brought up two things. One of them was Windsor. So I was in New York City working when Edie Windsor won her case, and was working for the national or for the LGBT Center in New York City. And Edie had loved the center. She was one of the founders of the
Yes.
center. She would come through and flirt with all the girls in the office.
No,
No, that was Edie. Yeah, and
not
so
Edie.
Edie would show up, and so I'm like, this case is coming. And Robbie Sherman was a supporter of the center. There were all kinds of connections. Sherman, right? The
No,
lawyer?
I had it when you first said it. Her name, I had her last name, and now
That's
I've
not.
completely lost it. Not Sherman. I know it
No,
isn't
that's
Sherman.
Bobby Sherman. Robbie. She wrote the
Oh
great
my
book.
goodness.
Oh my
Yes.
God, here we are. Somebody will find it and whisper it in my ear. But they were all connected to the center. And we knew the Supreme Court case was coming. And we were the same thing you were going through, like which date, which date, which date, which date. And so we worked to get a big screen set up on the second floor of the center. It was before the big remodel, the Capitol campaign. We got that set up there, and we convinced Edie to have her press conference at the center. So that day, the ruling came down. New York City gays are always late. And so it's me and a couple of friends, and the ruling comes down. And the reporters are all starting to show up, and these, I believe it was three black limos pull up, and the doors open, and only women stepped out of each one of them, which was like, oh my God, talk about marginalized group of people in leadership. Um, and here are all these women, and Edie came in. Cut to the chase. So that Edie's like, I'm not talking to anybody. Well, after the press conference was over, she's like, I want to see people because there were then thousands of people at the center.
Right.
And we didn't have a security plan. And so Glenda Testone, who was the CEO at the time, and me, we looked at each other and she's like, I'll take the left door and you take the right door. And it was our jobs to hold the masses off of touching Edie and staying away. It was the best dyke job in New York City probably ever
Uh,
given. And it was
uh,
mine. And so I mean, one woman taking down the Supreme Court.
mhm.
Did you get to meet Edie?
Yes, I met Edie in June of 2015 before the decision came out. We were at the ACLU offices in New York and just became fast friends.
Yeah, I bet.
We shared things in common that yeah, nobody else was going to share. And we just became fast friends. She was delightful. I miss her greatly.
Yeah, I do too.
And I did remember it's Robbie Kaplan, by the way.
Thank Kaplan. Thank you. I don't know why I was like flashing back to my high school walls of people. Right? um, so we ask all of our guests a couple of questions. What are you reading right now, Jim?
Oh, right now, oh, I read almost exclusively fiction, and I've been in a streak of reading gay romances. So I forget the title, but it's these four princes in Europe. They're all friends. So I have no idea what the one is. The prince and the player, maybe. I don't know.
Love it.
It's just right now, especially, I want happy things that are escapes.
Yep.
But I will say, before that, I finished reading two books by T.J. Klune, The House in the Cerulean Sea and Somewhere Beyond the Sea. Phenomenal books. And I have to say, my favorite thing was when I finished the first book. In the afterword, the author signed their name, and then underneath their name said the anti J.K. Rowling. And I loved that. Made me love the book even more.
Thanks for that tip. What are you listening to right now in music?
Well, right before I joined the Zoom, I was listening to the recording of the National Orchestra Institute, which is affiliated with the University of Maryland. I was listening to the world premiere performance of John and Jim in the National Cathedral. So it's a piece of music that was commissioned by the Queen City Freedom Band in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the Columbus Pride Band in Columbus, Ohio, as part of a conference for the Pride Bands Alliance. And they brought in a queer composer, Viet Kwong, to compose this piece of music in John's and my honor. And it was first done for symphonic band, and then he did the orchestra arrangement. So I was just listening to the recording in the National Cathedral of John and Jim. So that was the most recent thing I was listening to.
Wow, that is a beautiful tribute. Jim, it's always an honor and also really fun to talk to you. You're a very kind and serious guy, and I like that. Um, Plus, your playfulness in such tough times. I mean, you gave us some of the highlights, but I know there were a lot of tears behind. I don't know, but I can just surmise from knowing you the little bit that I do that you gave a lot. You haven't given it all yet. We're still counting on you, but you gave a lot for our movement, for our families, and for our love. And I want to thank you very much for everything. And I especially want to thank you for joining me today on Proudly Out of Line.
So happy to be on today, Marty. Thank you for the invitation. Always a joy to talk with you, and thank you for the kind words. And I will say, it never felt like I was giving a lot because I was fighting for the most important person in my world, and I was fighting for people like us just to be seen. And honestly, that was a really easy thing to do.
You make it look easy. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks so much.
Proudly Out of Line is brought to you by Rocky Mountain Equality, with help from your host, Marty Moore, executive producer, Amy Zuckerman, audio producer, Theo Conover. Until next time,